we talked to you a lot about crime here on the show. And Mayor Lori Lightfoot, I think it's important to note that she didn't just lose, she got crushed. She was repudiated. Don't listen to the narrative around that the libs put forward on this stuff, right? Don't listen to what they're trying to say. Lori Lightfoot was repudiated by her own previous voters. There are people in Chicago who are saying Lori Lightfoot's going to be great. And then it was, oh my God, she's horrible at her job. We have to get rid of her. Okay. So there's a little bit of a concern here. That's a harbinger, perhaps, of things to come. That's a little bit of an indicator, right? So that brings us to the D.C. crime bill, Clay. I think it's very interesting that right now you have Joe Biden, who has come forward to say that he will not. Well, let me step back to explain what's going on. The D.C. Council passed a crime bill that would eliminate a lot of mandatory sentences, lower penalties for violent offenses, including carjackings and robberies. Carjacking assailants are just not being, or rather they should be punished less severely. I'm trying to get this right. Than they have in the past. So they're not getting the second chances that they deserve over and over and over again. The D.C. City Council unanimously approved this. And now you have the Republican, because D.C. is a federal protectorate, the Republican Congress, and now the Republican Party in Congress, and then with the help of some Democrats in the Senate, have passed a block of this D.C. crime bill. And Joe Biden has come forward, Clay, to say he will not veto the Republican-led veto of the D.C. soft on crime bill. What's this telling you?
So for people out there who don't realize or haven't thought much about it, because a lot of people don't think about Washington, D.C. and what laws and regulations they can or cannot pass, Congress has the ability to oversee every promulgation of a rule or law that occurs in D.C. And they have an oversight board. And if they decide they don't like what D.C. is doing, they can overturn those laws, those regulations inside of the District of Columbia. They haven't done it, Buck, in 30 years. And you lived in D.C. I lived in D.C. I believe it's still there, every D.C. license plate, it actually says taxation without representation, because there's been this argument in D.C. We need to be made the 51st state. We need 2 senators. We need our congressperson who can actually have a full realm of congressional responsibilities. I think there's 700,000 people who live in Washington, D.C., if I'm not mistaken, in the District of Columbia right now. So, Buck, we talked earlier this week, I believe. Right now, murder is up 40% in Washington, D.C. so far in 2023. Crime in carjackings, I think, and car theft is up over 100%, I believe, is the number so far in 2023. And so what you've got is, and I think it ties in very well with this Lori Lightfoot race, you've got Democrats who are aware that defund the police, a.k.a. the single dumbest political slogan of the 21st century, is a massive issue for them. And so you said yesterday, I think it's true, and we've said it before on this program, Biden never endorse defund the police specifically. He actually fought back against it, which is to his credit, because this thing was crazy on the left wing in his party. And now a lot of Democrats that are in competitive districts, either in the House or in Senate races, are saying we cannot be seen as soft on crime. We can't get Lori Lightfooted. And so Republicans are leading the charge, and this soft on crime bill in D.C. is going to be repealed. Joe Biden is not going to veto it. This is a big win, the first big win, I would say, in terms of legislation for Republicans since they took back the House.
Without that level of top cover from the party, without Joe Biden saying, yeah, fine, we're gonna stop this and have D.C. pass its soft on crime, the D.C. Council pass its soft on crime bill. This is a signal to other Democrats. You're going to have to get, if you're in a competitive district or a competitive race anywhere in the country going into 2024, you better get on board with public safety. This whole, let's just defund police and pass bills that anybody who reads them, or pass laws that anybody who reads them understands, just makes it easier for criminals to do what they're doing. If you do that as a Democrat and you're in a competitive place, Democrat's not going to be able to save you. Democrat machinery is not going to be able to kick in. So it's get with the program time for a lot of them in these competitive areas. And by the way, for Joe Biden, too, for his reelection, he recognizes that. And this is why I've said this very early on, and I think it's very important for the GOP to understand this. We're not, even though Biden has done a lot of things that you would have gotten from a Bernie Sanders presidency or an AOC presidency, even though he has pushed a lot of far left stuff from the White House, that was then, this is now. You're going to start to see a move toward the center. Not that Biden is a centrist, but you'll see movements toward the center to protect his flank, so to speak, from some of the attacks that would come from the far left craziness. Because in a general election, that stuff is going to be a real liability. I mean, just given the amount of focus, attention, voter engagement, and crime is something that Democrats cannot defend what they were saying in 2020. They cannot defend it. So they're just going to pretend like they didn't say it. And Joe Biden's going to be a big part of that, which also means I think he's going to be a challenge to defeat, because he's going to say, oh, well, I never did that. That was other people. I support cops. Now, that's bull crap. But the truth is, a lot of people will say, well, I guess he wasn't a defund police guy.
I think what you're seeing also is who's the political candidate who has run the best campaign on crime so far since Joe Biden became president. I think it's Lee Zeldin. Lee Zeldin basically won Republicans the House by maniacally focusing on the crime issues in New York City in particular. He flipped a lot of Hispanic, Asian, and black voters over to the Republican Party who would have never voted Republican before because of the frustration surrounding crime. And so I think if you combine what Lee Zeldin did in New York City and what we now have seen in Chicago, Buck, and even in L.A., when Karen Bass won, she basically won on, we've got to clean up L.A., we got to do something with this homelessness problem, we've got to address all of the crime that's going on here. I think Democrats are a little bit terrified of this, because when Lori Lightfoot, Buck, goes from winning 73% of the vote for mayor in 2019 in Chicago, she won all 50 wards, she won all but 20 individual precincts, over 2,000 of them she won, and 83% of people voted against her in Chicago on Tuesday. Now, we'll see who wins that runoff race, but the guy who is favored to win it is a tough-on-crime Democrat who is probably as close to a Republican as Chicago is willing to consider electing right now. And everybody out there, their antenna have gone up, because I don't think abortion is going to be an issue. And let me explain what I mean by that, and I think you agree with me, Buck. In 2022, I do think abortion was an issue. I think most people are not seeing what Democrats told them they would see, where you feel like you're under siege in your state all of a sudden over abortion. I don't think it registers that much with many people.
Their best shot to use abortion as a wedge issue in favor of the Democrats was this last election cycle. From here on out, actually, it's going to be tougher and tougher, because they're going to be the ones saying, yeah, partial birth abortion and third trimester abortions. And, they're going to have to explain at a state level, because people are going to say, no, there actually is abortion is legal in some of these states. It's much less legal in other states. It depends. Obviously, there's a huge range. But now that more and more people will be exposed to what the reality of a post-Roe world is, I think it becomes there's still going to be a lot of fights at the state level about where those boundaries should be set. But at a national level, there's not going to be any ability to get away with abortion's basically illegal now, because that's just not, it's not true. I wish it were, but it's not true. So here we are looking at where Democrats are going to be most vulnerable. It's tough to know on the economy. And I know right now people are saying, oh my gosh, but look at where, yeah, but how is it going to be 12 months from now? Because even if it's not great, if it's a credible case to be made that things are getting a little bit better, they're going to say, the work's not done and we're in recovery. So it's tough to get ahead of what the economic dynamics will be for the election now, because we just don't know. Crime, though, has been a multi-year. This has been a really multi-decade, but certainly multi-year progression of the progressives to get it. I mean, the D.C. City Council, are these people crazy? And you wonder, given what's going on in D.C., I mean, you mentioned carjacking. Carjacking is different from car theft. Carjacking is, give me your car or I'll murder you. This is a violent crime. They think carjackers are being too harshly punished. There are more carjackers now than D.C.'s seen in decades.
Think about how tough it is, given how much crime has already gone up, particularly murder, to suddenly be up 40% more on murders in 2022. And I think you're right. The crime issue is going to resonate. And this is Biden's attempt to inoculate himself in some way. And certainly if you're Joe Manchin or you are running in Montana or you're running in Ohio, there are a lot of Democrats who know that this is a vulnerability for them.
Let's bring this home to, okay, this isn't, because we're talking about a country 300 and, I don't know, with all the illegals now, probably 340 million people. But you think about, where will this matter? This narrative we're talking about today. Why is Joe Biden willing to take heat from his own party? And, AOC and others are out there, oh my gosh, this is DC shit. Also, notice, they always do this. They're not really arguing on the merits of what's going on. The Democrat argument isn't, no, this let carjackers out of prison sooner bill is a great idea. That's not what they're saying. They're saying, oh, but home rule for DC or whatever it is. DC should be able to, control itself, which is not actually, as you already explained, not actually the way it works. Usually it's allowed to, but it doesn't mean it gets to. It's a different thing. Look at Wisconsin, Michigan. Look at the suburbs of Milwaukee. Look at the suburbs of, and, redder areas of Detroit. Look at Georgia and the suburbs of Atlanta. These are places where the crime narrative moves the needle. And those are states for suburban swing voters, for suburban college-educated voters, for soccer moms in the burbs. The crime thing does move the needle, and it does it in key states, and Democrats know it. So paying attention to what worries them is very good, meaning worries Democrats, is very good politics.